Hello, welcome back to Straight Facts. Hope everybody is well. Sorry about the slight delay. I've had a few technical problems my end. Jess, how are you?
I was trying to say it was your
I
fault,
can't hear you.
but you had me muted. Yeah, you had me muted.
What's going
So
on?
there you go. But yeah, I'm good. Like I
Anybody
can't
else can
complain.
Jess? Maybe I've got
I
the
was
wrong
on
earphone. I
time.
don't know. Can the viewers hear us?
Can you hear me?
Right, Jess, I can't hear you. So if you stop for a second, please. Can anybody hear us? Because Jess can hear me. I can't hear you now, Jess. Can you try and speak again for me?
Hello?
No, I can't hear you.
Okay.
Like everyone's saying they can hear us, but I can't hear. This is very strange.
Oh, oh, it's on your end then. Because I can hear
Okay,
you.
I've got you back now. I've got you back. I've got you back. I've got you back. There we go. Cool. Very sorry about the start of that. Anyone who's watching the playback or listening to the podcast of this, I just couldn't hear anything for a second. But we're back. We're here. We're in the house. Lots to talk about on the football terrace this afternoon. Thomas Tuchel, could he lose his job? Is that on the? I'm seeing the spaces. I'm seeing people say it feels like the end of an era. We're going to be talking about Arsenal creating more outrage. I triggered a bit of it this afternoon on Twitter. I didn't mean to, but we'll go through that. We're going to be taking a look at Man United and the pressures of playing at Old Trafford. Is that why Sancho and co are struggling? And of course, taking a look at the top four race with Man United playing tonight, Spurs playing tonight, but with Chelsea, of course, slipping up. And they have been slipping up. And they've been really slipping up, Chelsea.
Yeah, more than I thought. Okay, now there's like feedback. Are we good now? Yeah, now
I
we're
haven't got
good.
any feedback.
Well, I did. So, I mean, more than I thought they had, like when I'm watching them, I'm like, okay, well, they've had some, dodgy results here and there. But then when you look back at their form, you're like, wow, they've only won 4 games out of like the last 14. It actually has been worse than I thought. Yesterday's match was kind of what I thought would happen, but Chelsea were worse than what I had anticipated. I thought they had gotten over this little hump of bad form, and Brighton kind of sensed they had no fear, and as a big club, as Chelsea is with all the stars that they have in their squad, the last thing you want is a mid-table side, you know, having zero fear. You had Lukaku on the pitch, you had Conte on the pitch, you had good players out there, Thiago Silva as well as Rudiger, and they weren't scared at all. And that is kind of where you guys are right now, because I think, or where Chelsea is at the moment, where smaller teams are going to be looking at them like, well, we could probably get at them if we just keep going. And that's the last thing you want. And so, yeah, they are slipping a bit. And before the Brighton match, I had kind of said that I thought that game was really important because they need to be closer to Liverpool and Man City than to the rest of us kind of fighting for fourth. And if you look at the table, um, depending on what kind of results happen over the next couple of weeks, and then we know we have some rescheduled fixtures, but you can see a situation where Chelsea are right there in that top four kind of race there. And that's not what they set out to do at the beginning of the season. So
Yeah.
it's looking a little bit like, wow, they really have kind of slipped by the wayside a little bit.
They haven't. They've really shocked me, Chelsea, because they were my favourites to win the league. I felt that they already had a brilliant squad under Frank Lampard. Lots of money spent, lots of excellent players, like no doubts about it whatsoever. Really, really, really good. They had that brilliant last 6 months of the season, 5 months, 6 months under Thomas Tuchel. They win the Champions League. They're barely conceding goals. They start the season and they're barely conceding goals. They add Lukaku at £100 million. You expect, and this is where predictions are so interesting. Part of a prediction is based on what you see, and the other part of a prediction for a season-long prediction is who you expect to get better. I expected Mason Mount. I expected, he's done well this season, but faded a little recently. But I expected Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mason Mount, Kai Havertz, Werner, Ziyech. I expected all of them to improve. And I'm not talking about all become world class. I just expected improvement from each and every single one of them on the pitch for Chelsea. And there hasn't been that. The way they were playing the back end of last season, the amount of times you saw the ball flying across the 6-yard box, cutbacks being made, etc. You thought, right, Lukaku will come in and clear that up. It hasn't happened. And it's almost as if some negativity has got into the dressing room, some doubt has got into the dressing room, and they're not believing at the moment. And there was a tweet from the Grand Dam, a big and respected Chelsea fan. And people sometimes say, don't listen to fan opinion. That's hard when you're a fan channel. Fan opinion is key because fans, unlike journalists who often look at things from a fairly objective point of view, feelings in a sense when someone is, most Chelsea fans know more about their club than journalists. They are so dedicated to it. And he tweeted out something yesterday, which was, this feels like a team coming to the end of an era, the end of something special. And I get where he's coming from. It's crazy because he's a year in.
Yeah.
But the way they're performing is reminiscent of performances at Chelsea with a manager that the squad doesn't want there anymore. And at the very least, they have been dragged into a top 4 race. I'm not suggesting, and I don't think yet Thomas Tuchel's job is under threat, but we're asking the question today, could he be sacked? Not to try and create any drama, but how much more can they fall before this starts becoming a serious question within the Chelsea fan base, a serious question at board level, maybe?
Well, let's back up just a little bit because I think that there is kind of an elephant in the room here that has been kind of touched upon, but never really, I think, given the amount of air that it should be given. And it's not having Ben Chilwell and Reece James in your team. You know, they're wing backs, but we know in Tuchel's system over the past year, they've been used almost as midfielders. They create a lot of their chances. And so having Lukaku there, but without those key playmakers, which are their wing backs in their system, you could make an argument that that has to be looked at as like, and then also the people that are replacing them, Azpilicueta plus Alonso, who are not on that same level as Reece James and Chilwell. So I guess my question to you is that something that we should look at? Because any team that's missing key players, we would look at that. And even though Chelsea is such a great side, the drop off between those two and the two that are playing now, we can't act like it's the same. And is that something that they should look at when they're looking at Tuchel and saying he doesn't have the tools necessary to play the system at the maximum like he was last season? And he's kind of just pushing things together, trying to make things work. And those players are not, they're not at the level. They're just not there to keep them going. And there's also the almost mirroring of that, where you look at teams outside of Chelsea that have Chelsea products in their side that could be playing those positions for them. Players like Lamptey, players like Livramento. So is this a bigger Chelsea issue than just Tuchel, or is it just laying it at his feet, even though he doesn't have the tools and everybody can kind of see it? Is it okay to just say, well, Chelsea are a big squad, are a big team, so we don't want to hear anything about them not having their best players?
There's losing your best players and not, or important players and falling back. I suppose what you've got to look for, and it's a really good point you raise, is it's been 13 games now that Chelsea haven't been what I would say at their brilliant best, including, games like against Zenit in the Champions League would be a prime example. And I'm just going to go look at this now. I was trying to look at it when you were speaking, and we've seen Liverpool fall off with injuries last season. We saw City 2 seasons ago essentially fall off when they had injuries. They still won a League Cup that season, but they didn't challenge for the Premier League. They categorically didn't do that, as we kind of know. But I was looking at Chelsea's form here. I think what you've said is a legitimate reason. So it is a reason. You're right. Losing those players, it can be seen as kind of detrimental in that way. But if we were to look here, for instance, at they drew with Zenit St. Petersburg. I'm just opening up the match reports for these games. I'm looking at the 3-2 to Leeds, the 1-1 with Everton as an example, because I don't know this as a case. I want to look at it from that point of view. So with Ben Chilwell may have already been out by then, but they still had everybody, including Reece James. The game against Zenit Petersburg, Reece James was available. The game against Leeds, which they narrowly won, as an example, Reece James started him. So I get the Ben Chilwell thing. But this bad form started when it was only him that was missing. I think using that as an excuse, which I do, too many Chelsea fans have done, and to a degree, I think Chelsea Football Club have done, it gives an out for these players. The same as when, I don't know if we have the physicality and the fitness and the squad to beat Wolves. That ain't the message your players want to hear. You give them an excuse not to win. And I think these have been mistakes by Chelsea Football Club and by the management to allow an air of weakness to seep into this dressing room. We've got an excuse. Ben Chilwell and Reece James are now missing. Therefore, if we don't win, we have an excuse. You don't tend to see that from Pep Guardiola. You don't tend to see that from Jurgen Klopp. Zinchenko, like, they haven't had a recognized left back at Man City for a while. Zinchenko fills in. They move their right back into that position, and they still are able to push on and push through. I'm not buying that it's solely because of that. They have got a squad worth, what, 800, 900 million, £1 billion. They have Pulisic. I didn't mention him earlier, by the way. They have Hudson-Odoi. They have Mason Mount. They have Ziyech. They have Kai Havertz. They have Jorginho, they said was one of the best midfielders in the world. They've got Kovacic, who's a great driver with. But all these players, in the games where they've dropped points against, Champions League and Premier League, Zenit, the West Ham, these are good enough to create opportunities. So I get that it makes you, maybe it takes away from your ability to win the league. Maybe you drop just enough points where City pull away from you by 5, 6, 7 points. But how many points are they behind now? Is it like 15 points? That's too much. And they've been beaten and had draws against teams that are nowhere near their standards. The game against Man United, they drew 1-1. They absolutely tore us apart. They just couldn't score. I think it's too convenient just to say Ben Chilwell was injured, therefore it's nobody's fault. No blame on the manager. The rest of the squad just ain't quite good enough. That's a cop-out for me. If you'd have said to Chelsea fans at the start of the season, you can win the league unless Ben Chilwell gets injured, they'd have called you a liar. They said, that's nonsense. They'd have named all those players I've said. We've got all these guys in our squad. And I think Chelsea fans in their hearts think and feel this. It's a much bigger issue than just the fullbacks. But of course, it plays a part for me.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, and for me, I just want to I want to look at all sides and see what could potentially be the reason for the drop off in form. And so, I've listened to some Chelsea spaces over the last couple of weeks, and it's been very entertaining. I'm not going to lie. It's fun watching the capitulation. But some of the points that have been mentioned are things that, as an Arsenal fan, I wouldn't ever know because I'm not that tuned into your fan base. And something that's been mentioned is, has Tuchel been supported? We know that to a certain degree, Lukaku was a board signing and not a Tuchel signing. And this goes back to the maybe not mindful, but based on pattern culture of Chelsea Football Club, which they have a manager, they have some success, and then they don't really support them with the players that they particularly want, or they stop supporting, or there's some sort of friction between the board and the manager. And even though Tuchel has been here for a year and has them in several different competitions, has won them the Champions League, he's still getting what you could look at as the same treatment as other managers. And that's strange to me. He clearly needed some other players in the squad, even though I know that they spent a lot of money with Frank Lampard, but those are not Tuchel's players. And so do you think that Tuchel is being given the amount, is he being given the right amount of respect from the Chelsea board, considering what he's won for them? Or is it just kind of the game at Chelsea Football Club? We give you what we give you and you work with it. And if you don't, you're out.
So I think, as I say, I think that Tuchel's made some mistakes, but all managers do. I see a few people in the comments going, Terry's turning on Chelsea. I can't turn on Chelsea. They're not my team. When things are going well, I'll praise. When things are not going so well, I'll criticize. That's par for the course. I agree. I don't think hindsight's lucrative. He wanted more. I think that's why they plugged in that signing of Sao Niguez. It was almost, we'll get you a midfielder because we can't get you the midfielder that we want. Equally, though, he's got Lukaku, and Lukaku hasn't been very good, but they're not playing to Lukaku's strengths. They're trying to play football through him. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's like, this might not be a reference you get, but it's like Ashley Banjo trying to recruit me for diversity. I can't street dance, so why are you putting me in there? Like, I'm going to look terrible. You know, that's it. That's the way I look at this. They're trying to play football with Lukaku in a way he can't. It's partly on the manager and it's partly on the club. Now, some will argue he's got a philosophy, let him play his way. If you haven't got the tools to do it, you need to adapt. And so I think there's an element of both in terms of not being backed. The squad is worth £1 billion or so quid. That's backing in itself. You also know with Chelsea, the way they operate is the way they operate. Could they do with more? Of course they could. But then why are they not going out this month and breaking the bank for him? They've got the money for it. Go and do it. Like the Chelsea board, look, they're a well-run football club. I'm not trying to deny it, but they sometimes do things that confuse me. So it's almost a case of, you can see maybe there's these problems. Why have they not just gone out and bought someone this month? And I kind of made excuses for them, thinking, oh, maybe they're worried about, squad harmony when certain players return. Do you know what? I'm wrong to say that, because Chelsea have never cared about that before. It's always been survival of the fittest. If we bring in another left back and he turns out to be better than Ben Chilwell, well, Ben Chilwell, you fight to get back in the team, or you're on the bench, or you leave. That's been Chelsea's way. It's battle of attrition, survival of the fittest the whole time. Well, certainly that's my view of them from the outside in. And there's an interesting question here that says, we were top of the league when Chile and James were on smoke. Chile got injured and James has various injuries. It coincided with a drop in form. Why aren't we allowed to blame injuries like Liverpool? Well, you can, but we disagreed. Again, there's blaming injuries for a drop-off, and then there's a complete collapse. The collapse is too big to solely be those two players for me. The drop-off is too big for it to solely be those two players. And I think that it's absolutely fine for Chelsea fans to believe that. Of course, it's your beliefs. I'm not here to... I'll challenge your beliefs, but I'm not here to try and change your mind. I'm just giving you my views. For me, Liverpool fans had this notion of, once we get Van Dijk back, watch us back. Right now, they're not. They're better than last year, but they're nowhere near back to their peak, because there were so many other issues that we were all pointing out that they wanted to ignore and blame purely and simply on injuries. And I would just say to Chelsea fans, it isn't about wanting Tuchel out. It isn't about saying it's all on Lukaku. It isn't about, just because the fullbacks are out. It will be a number of things, and it means a number of things need to be addressed and resolved. If you build up this false sense of hope that one area gets fixed and we're absolutely back and ready, it's a madness. You also then need to look beyond those fullbacks, because what if they get injured again? You can't have a team that can win the league but only if certain two players are there and available. You need a team that can win the league if one of them, can still compete if one or two of them drop out for a period of time. Like, you need that as a football club. And the lack of goals at Chelsea, it can't just be because of fullbacks, in my opinion, when you've got those other players there. You've got something that, for instance, Liverpool don't have. You've got so much creativity in your front line. Liverpool don't have that, especially from the midfield areas. City have it. City have got very good fullbacks when it comes to the creative side. Are there very many better fullbacks than Cancelo? No. But look what Bernardo Silva has been doing. Look what KDB is consistently doing. Look what Mahrez has been delivering. Their forwards step up at the same time, and it's about being a team. That's what I would say, my friend. And I'm not saying that it doesn't play a factor, but it isn't the be-all and end all for me. I don't think it is.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
No. Go on. I was just talking. Go on.
No, I think what's interesting about Chelsea is that, and this is something that, like, I want to preface by saying, I know Arsenal is not the most well-run club, but I can still speak on what your club is all about if you're a Chelsea fan. And it's just interesting because we always say that Chelsea is a well-run club, right? And I think we can start looking at that narrative and look at it a little bit more closely, because although it's brought them trophies, they are kind of falling behind in terms of winning the Premier League and being able to win it multiple times in a row. And we're seeing that the standard is being set by Manchester City. They have the way that they run their club. They're always ahead of their transfers. They never seem to have gaps in the squad. They're always like a well-run machine. Pep has been there for a long period of time. They're not chopping and changing managers. And so the standard of what a good club or what a well-run club, I think, has changed. Now, Manchester City is the standard, and Chelsea need to aspire to be that, because last summer their transfer window was looked at as a success. They had brought in like 7 players, they'd filled all the gaps, they had did this and that, and they're well run because they spend a lot of money. But when you look at that group of players that they brought in, Ziyech, you can say that he was a flop. Pulisic as well. He was a season before that. You can say that he's a flop. Havertz, besides scoring the Champions League winner, you could probably say flop. Werner, flop. Lukaku looking like a flop. So it's kind of like, are they well run, or do they just spend a lot of money and spend enough where they have enough good players in the squad that a manager can get something out of them for about a year, and then it falls off and then they have to start over again? And is that a model that is success, or is that just what the status quo has been over the last 5 years or so? Because the standard is changing. And when I look at Man City, I don't think they have us in a chokehold. They're 15 points ahead of Chelsea, and we're saying that they're a well-run club capable of fighting for the title, and they're not.
Look, I would say this: they're a well-run club, but then there are levels within levels within levels within levels. So they're well-run enough to be at the top of the tree. But when you get to the top of the tree, who is the king? And Man City are doing that. And I echo what a few of the Chelsea boys said on the terrace last night. And I think Chelsea have been trying to fix this for a while. They need to adapt their style in terms of building a more continuous philosophy, which is more transferable between managers because football is evolving into something new. You're looking at what Man City are doing and what Liverpool are doing. That continuity has, especially at Man City, has led to crazy levels of success. Most Chelsea fans are desperate, are absolutely desperate for whatever's going on right now, whatever you believe, whether it's just injuries, whether it's injuries and some player power, whether it's just player power, whatever it may be. I think there are a lot of Chelsea fans who are, so for instance, with the Grand Dam, I haven't asked him, but this is my interpretation. He doesn't want Tuchel gone. He backs Tuchel, but he gets a feeling that if the players become disgruntled, they'll stop, the board will sack, they go to somebody new, and it's starting over again from fresh. And there's a comment here that kind of backs this up as well, from why UFC, that says Terry HH did a post-match Chelsea stream yesterday. He had 9 Chelsea fans on his stream, and they all said that Thomas Tuchel will get the sack. I think most Chelsea fans, when they're honest, know that if the results don't start to turn around and they fall, if they don't finish in the top 4, he's 100% gone, in my opinion. But he could come third and finish 30 points behind Man City. And if he doesn't do very well in the Champions League, I wouldn't, if we suddenly saw the yellow banner on Sky Sports saying he's been sacked, it wouldn't shock me. But your question remains, they've built a squad now that's meant to be for Thomas Tuchel. Are they going to find someone of Thomas Tuchel's level or better who plays that way of football to get the very best out of this squad? I don't know. I think they have to. We know we're never going to see an Alex Ferguson again or an Arsene Wenger that spent 25 years at a club. I also don't know. I think Chelsea's model, I said this a few years back, it got shot down. I remember the only guy that backed it was Monster. Chelsea's model worked very well up until about 5-6 years ago because they were the powerhouse. They had far more money than anybody else. They don't anymore. They don't have more money than the majority of clubs because of FFP and the new TV deal money. So they can't just go out and buy all the best players and bring the best manager in, and that kind of counterbalance that sort of sometimes the lack of continuity. Does that make sense? They have to create a hybrid model of the two things. And I thought Tuchel was going to be that. So if I take my Man United hat off, it's sad to see. As a Man United fan, though, let me say this now. I want Tuchel sacked because he's amazing.
And they'll never find anybody else, Terry. I mean, that goes to that they will find somebody else. But when you look at the manager market out there, it's scant. Like, it's scant, especially at the tippy top level. PSG is looking at Zidane. Pochettino might end up at Man United. Who are they going to get? Could you get a Nagelsmann to drop off Bayern, a well-run, well-oiled machine that's not going to sack you in a season, to go to Chelsea just because? I mean, it's one of those where I can understand why the alarm bells are finally going off in the Chelsea fans' heads. It's because they actually like this guy. They actually like Thomas Tuchel, and he could build something at Chelsea, but the way that their club is run, it probably won't happen like that. And it's sad to see from like just a general standpoint. I kind of share your sentiment that like if he got sacked, I'd be like, ooh, you know, because that's probably your best opportunity to get a manager of that level work,
Yeah.
you know, right
Y-
now, because
Hang on.
they're not there. Like, there's no, where are the managers at? Like, you're gonna hire Frank
You're spot
Lampard
on.
again? Like, what are you gonna do?
You're spot on. And I mean, look, it's even beyond getting a better manager. It's if someone can come in and be the first manager, I think he's the first manager in Premier League history to get his team into cup finals of the first 3 cups he plays in. So to do FA Cup, Champions League, League Cup, no one's ever done that. He won the Champions League. He's got a great chance of winning the League Cup. He can still win the Champions League this year. And if there are any players that are looking to try and throw him under the bus, he needs every single Chelsea fan and that board behind him, because that's how the mold gets broken. Words and statements and everything else are there. And I think he is the best person for the job. I honestly feel like now when you look across, I don't care how well managers on other continents are doing, because they're not tested in the best continent in the world for football, which is the Premier League. And the reason it's the best here is we have the best players somewhere in the world here. So I mean that with all due respect to every other continent, but you can't touch European football. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. Because essentially, we take the best South Americans, the best Africans, the best Asians, the best Americans, and best Europeans all play here primarily. So that's why it's the best. The best managers then will stay here. Right now, he's in the top 5 managers in Europe without a shadow of a doubt. To sack him, you're going to get a lesser manager in who's then going to face the same problems again anyway. So I think the board needs to stand by him. Rivals should be desperate for him to go. Rivals should be desperate for him to be sacked. But I think the Champions League could be the tipping point. I feel like the Champions League, how well he does in that is going to be, if he goes out in the next round and end up finishing 20 plus points behind Man City, I wouldn't be surprised if he was gone. As a football fan, I think that would be an absolute travesty. As a Man United fan, it would be music to my ears, because it could be a couple of years again before Chelsea are like title contenders. They could have a few floaty years like they did under Frank Lampard, and we want that. And that's why most Chelsea fans want him to stay. And you've obviously got the weird Frank Lampard fanboys who are desperate for Tuchel to go just so they can say basically he had a purple patch of form, but actually he wasn't better than Lampard, which is just weird to me. We have some super chats here. Remember, if you've got any questions for Jess or I, we've got the quick fire round coming up a little bit later. Please make sure the like button is being smashed for the Football Terrace today. We do want your thoughts and we want your feelings. We'll always try and prioritize super chats and member chats as well. If you're actually asking us questions and stuff, a lot of your comments are just to each other in the chat, which is also really nice. That's part of why we created this community. Please make sure you're also following our Twitch account. The link for that is in our description below. We're live from around 7 o'clock for both games tonight. Brentford, Man United, and Leicester versus Tottenham, and match reaction straight after. But the watch along is exclusive on Twitch, so you need to be following us over there. Let's take a look at some of these comments that have come through during the show. What's up with Arsenal players being investigated over deliberate yellow cards? We will look at that a little bit later, Red Wolf, but thank you. Terry, this stream started off terrible, just like United season. Oh, thank you. It started off terrible. I'm very sorry. Who would you like United to sign this window? One player. We'll save that for the quick fire round later as well. It's getting there, just not yet, is what's being said here by Laddie. I don't quite know what you mean by that, my friend, but thank you. Said it as a joke, but Carrick actually broke Tuchel, is what's being said there. Rose says the only team to play. Do you think this has played a part? I want to get your take on this. This is a great question or a great statement. The only team to play every 3 days in this world since the last international break is Chelsea, and still only lost 4. Like essentially saying stop it. But there's a lot of Chelsea fans that have said we've been hindered by everybody else being allowed to have breaks because of postponements, etc. Do you think that's played a big part in Chelsea's drop off?
Well, you can't say in one breath that you have similar depth and squad quality as Man City, and then when your squad depth and squad quality is put to test, you start saying, well, that's the reason why we've fallen off and this and that. When the season started, even I thought the squad depth and quality is similar, and you should be able to maneuver that squad around and get results. So I kind of hear what you're saying, and I do think it plays a part, but we can't over egg it when at the beginning of the season everybody was putting Chelsea's squad depth and quality right up there with Man City, and you don't see them complaining. You know what I mean? And they do play a lot of games as well. And I don't think they've had very many games postponed, if my memory serves me right. So if you want to be up there, these kind of like little like, well, we're doing this and finding these weird stats about how you have had a break in this and that. Your squad depth and quality was up there with Man City, so you can't use that now as an excuse, really. Not a full-on excuse. It can be a reason, but I mean, it's more than that. We know it because there's issues with the players, the manager, the board. It's more than just you're missing your players and you haven't had a break. Like, it's more than that.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. Look, I get that it will impact them, and everybody else is having breaks. But we saw managers like Klopp say that the reason they lost to Leicester is because Leicester were in a better flow.
Because they
had
because
time
they
off.
yeah.
As a
Yeah.
Man United fan, I'm not suggesting that we've had no benefit for having time off. We look just as bad as an example. Newcastle played brilliantly against Man United, had a couple of games off because of postponements, came back and got knocked out of the FA Cup by Cambridge. So I don't think there's a foregone, then drew their next game to Watford. So I don't necessarily think there's no cast iron pattern to a team having time off versus a team who didn't or had less time, who's won the most amount of games. If someone could show me a study that shows that the teams that had time off have won like 80% more points, then I think there's a point. I feel that's one of the mistakes that Tuchel made, though, and about we're tired, we played too much, we didn't get this called off. I think that gives an excuse for players, and players are like all human beings. If they've got an excuse to like let up a little bit, like people do it. Like we it's a natural trait within people if there's an excuse there. Gayan here says, I love Tuchel, but he's mostly to blame for the team being drained by double sessions training the players, need extra recovery time, then will improve. This comment here says, I agree, but Chelsea is run like Madrid. You don't win, you get fired. No time to build, just win with what you have. That again, but you have to look. This is where that model, as I said, needs adapting. So, great point. It needs adapting. As a general rule in Spain, there for the last 20 years, there have been two teams that win. You had Valencia a little while back under Rafa that had a little spell. You've had a few little moments where Atletico have been very good, but as a general rule, it is a two-horse race. So you're up against one other team. In the Premier League, it's a lot more competitive. Now, Man City are by far and away at the minute better. When you go below that, you've got Liverpool, then you've got Chelsea. Up until this season, you had Man United that were there. Leicester have been brilliant for the last 3 or 4 years. Tottenham have had a bit of a downturn in the last 18 months, but for 5 years, we're great. Like, we're a tough team that could beat you. I feel like the competitiveness of the Premier League is mad. And I know everyone's looking at it like a Farmers League because Man City are just, at this moment in time, that much better than everybody else. But the pack behind them are really, really good. Right down to the lower level teams in the Premier League, the competitiveness stays, the fitness stays, the physicality stays. So I get your point, but I think it's very different when you compare it to a two-horse race. I hope Tuchel stays and Chelsea are overrated and just back 5 merchants, and Chelsea remember Man City 1, Chelsea 0. That's from Lang and Sweet, who of course is a very big Manchester City fan that watches the Terrace. Excuses, same reasons I get frustrated with Klopp, is what Hamid has got to say. If City lost 3 in 5, depending on players, would struggle. Oh, lost 3 to 5 players, they would struggle. Oh, I hear that. But remember, that season that Chelsea still had all those players out, they still finished the season with about 85 points. That season where they dropped off and didn't get near Liverpool, they still finished on enough points that year to have won league titles in something like 9 other seasons. Like, it wasn't a terrible season. It was just they lost a little bit of ground on Liverpool, but then bounced back straight away. And that was one player out, and no one allowed them to have that excuse. Everybody said Liverpool just couldn't be an excuse. So I'm going to stay true and say that the injuries are a part of the problem. They are not the problem and the only one, in my view. I've got a few more super chats, and then we're going to keep on this thread, but we're going to kind of move on to a different part of it. Tell the Arsenal lady, first of all, her name is Jessica Black, so please use her name. Memory doesn't serve her right. Chelsea fans never compared their team quality to City's. It was others doing it. Go check.
I will find the clip of Daniel saying it at the beginning of the season where everybody was saying that Man City were stacked, and he turned around and said, "Well, nobody ever talks about Chelsea. We have very similar squad quality and depth." I will find it for you.
There we go. Chelsea lost 4 games all season, so same as City. So the rest is just legit excuses. Lots of draw. And the thing is, when you go back to a lot of those draws, they have the better team. They controlled most of the ball. They had the majority of the chances. The 2 games against Brighton are like anomalies in this, because it's only the 2 games against Brighton where they were outplayed. The rest of the games, Chelsea were the better team. They were. I remember it, especially the game against Man United. But that's just my take anyway. Viewers, make sure that like button is being smashed. We have another super chat here that says, if we're giving Klopp nicknames for moaning, we've got to keep the same energy for TT. Hashtag Tracy Tuchel is what A-Spec Limited.
Now, here's one thing though, like, we're attributing female names to men who we consider moaners and all of this kind of stuff. It's a little bit like the Karen one is funny because Karen in America is basically like a whiny woman because she doesn't want to wear a mask during COVID. But you know,
I hear you on
come
that.
on,
Yeah,
y'all.
no, I hear you. The Karen one is makes sense. The rest of it, I do hear you on that 100%. And I'm not overtly woke, but I do. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Is there any famous examples of a Tracy moaning? I don't know. I don't think there is, right?
Probably not outside of LA. No, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just trying to think. I'm just trying to help the guy that said that, really. There was another super chat from JJ that I missed, sorry. He said that Chelsea fans last season said injuries are not an excuse. Well, this is the thing, when you throw, what's the expression? Don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. It's happened to like so many fan bases every year. Liverpool fans told City fans that it wasn't an excuse. The following season, like City and Chelsea fans told Liverpool it wasn't an excuse, and it's moving on to Chelsea now. I find it quite interesting to watch, because my club, doesn't matter if we're fully fit or injured, we're still rubbish. But there we go. What does it say here? Put the names on the screen so we can use them.
Oh, because somebody said, because I'm the Arsenal lady, and you said use her name.
Okay. I've said Jessie's name a good few times on the show. I haven't said Jessica Black like 30 times, like her full name. So the only thing about the Harry Potter films that used to weird me out, how many times people that even knew him called him Harry Potter. It's like, I don't.
Well, that's kind of like Ben White. Nobody says just White. It's always Ben plus White. But you'll use like other people's, Ronaldo.
Yeah, Bruno's his first name. Gerard gets called Gerard. Yeah. No one's called him White yet.
You know what I mean? Some people, it's like, I think it just all goes together, But like even Harry Potter, he's the main character, so that's probably the reason why it was always Harry Potter.
Say that again. Say that again. Now do it in that voice again, please.
I'll never do it again.
Yo,
if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. You didn't get it.
I got it. I just want to hear it again. I can go back and listen to it on the stream. What am I talking about? Playback.
I watched Harry Potter last night.
There we go. There we go. Yes, listen. Keep smashing that like and share button, people. The next thing I want to ask you, it relates to Chelsea. We know they're struggling. Are they already in the top 4 race, like dragged into it? And can you see them legitimately missing out on a Champions League place in the Premier League?
Well, here's the thing, and this is an interesting part of Chelsea's season, because once you're no longer fighting for what you thought you were fighting for from in the beginning, right? They are fundamentally out of the title race, and there's no way to really change that. How do you motivate the squad to continue to make sure you get points on the board so you stay far enough away from the top 4 race? Because if you get dragged into it, then you're in a position where, if you were no longer motivated and then you slip into fighting, how do you get the team up for fighting for something that you weren't ever supposed to be a part of? So I think that's a part of Tuchel's part of what he has to deal with in this period, is to keep the team fighting for something other than the title, to keep them from slipping into that top 4 race. I'm not sure because there's all these games in hand that, other teams have. And if you look at the math and you do your little calculations, if these teams were going to win their games in hand, they could be right there with Chelsea. But what I will say is that I think if Chelsea can find even a speck of form, I still think they're better than Spurs, Arsenal, West Ham, and United. I still think they have a little bit more about them than the rest of those teams. And if they just have a little bit of fight left in them, at least, just have a little bit of pride about you. You don't want to get sucked in. I think they can stay in that third place spot without really like sinking low. But if they do, and they go from complacency to having to fight to stay in that fourth spot, it could get really, really bad for them at the back end of the season, because Spurs, Arsenal, United, West Ham are all fighting for that spot. And if those teams sense blood, it might be curtains for Chelsea. So that's kind of how I think about it. But Tuchel has to keep them motivated, and in a time where they're not, footballers are like people in sports, athletes are motivated by trophies and getting to a certain benchmark or whatever, and not having the title to fight for. What are they actually fighting for right now beyond the Champions League? And that's the problem that they have right now.
No, listen, I hear you completely. I think it's a great point you raise, and it is getting that balance right. It's maintaining that discipline at the right times, because they have been dragged into it. And mathematically, they're another loss or defeat away from being potentially in trouble, because if Arsenal win their 3 games, and I know it's all if, by the way, one of Arsenal's games in hand is against Tottenham. So one of them can't win. Both or one of them can't win all their games in hand. Spurs have 5. If Spurs were to win their 5, that's a 4-point gap. The scary bit is this, though. Tottenham play Chelsea next. So if Tottenham was to get even a draw, even worse, a win, suddenly you're like, well, if they win their games in hand now, then you're looking at anything from a 5 to a 7-point gap. Plus Arsenal now, if they win this weekend and we lose, they maintain their games in hand, but they're even closer. Chelsea then go away to the World Club Championship. It's 2 games that Spurs and Arsenal play. None of their game in hand games, but just natural games. So it's almost this case of like when Chelsea play their game in hand, the other 2 teams have them as well. If Spurs and Arsenal are able to catch them in that time period where they're away by 5 to 6 points, you find yourself in a situation where suddenly they're only 3 or 4 points behind you, but still have, in Arsenal's case, maybe 1, but in Tottenham's case, maybe 3 games in hand over them. It becomes really difficult from a focus point of view. Yes, you just got to keep winning games, but you don't quite know how to look over your shoulder because you're 3 points in front, 4 points in front, but they've got to play their games. Now, are Arsenal and Tottenham going to win all their games in hand? We've seen with Man United, we've seen with other teams that isn't always possible. And I just still think that Chelsea still have the advantage, but it's these next 3 or 4 games that are massive for them, because if they get to a point where they're only 2 or 3 points ahead of Arsenal and Spurs, but those teams have a big amount of games in hand over them, the pressure is just going to become unsurmountable. And that's when the board at Chelsea start to look. That's when the board start to say, well, what's going on? And Arsenal have been brilliant. Arsenal have been brilliant. There's no doubt they have. That Arsenal have shocked people. We're going to get onto some Arsenal outrage later, but we know that Arsenal have shocked people because a lot of people are embarrassed to admit that, I was a little bit wrong. You are a lot better than I thought you would be this season. But Spurs are the enigma here for me, because they have been average in cup games under Conte, but they have been machine-like in the league, which is almost the epitome of Antonio Conte. He's not a great cup manager, but he is impeccable in leagues. Nearly every single time he's managed a team in the league, barring that second season at Chelsea where it was all going wrong, he is invariably brilliant. And I wouldn't be surprised if him and his Tottenham team grind out, sometimes they'll play well, but grind out a very high percentage, 60, 70% win ratio over the remainder of the season, because that's just what him and his team do. And the scary factor is Adama Traore looks like he's going to be on his way in. That could add something, maybe. If they sign another player or 2, if they can bring in a little bit of extra quality and depth, they could be dangerous. And Chelsea just need to watch that. He needs to bet that right now in the Prem, the Chelsea players look unmotivated. They look unmotivated. And I don't know how he motivates them. That isn't my job. But he has to get them to a point where they are fully focused, where they are working hard, because it will end in disaster for not the players. It'll end in disaster for Tuchel if they get caught by if they get caught by both of those teams and end up fifth. It is a disaster. It really is. So it's going to be really interesting. Do you think either Arsenal or Tottenham will catch them though?
I think the not having the title to fight for and being involved in other cups that are going to be what Tuchel needs in order to stay in the job will make it difficult for Chelsea to be disciplined in the league. That being said, like all the games in hand, I just looked at our schedule as well. Like, and we're kind of the dark horse in this because Spurs have way more games in hand, and people seem to really feel like they're the team that's going to catch them. Fair enough, you know, but we're playing Brentford, Watford, Burnley, you know, like we could catch them as well. And like the pressure of being ahead and then being complacent and falling behind, I think is not the position that you want to be in. You kind of want to be in the position of chasing a team that looks vulnerable, you know? And so if I think it'll be anybody, I think it may be Spurs because, as you've said, they've been able to grind out wins. I still think that I would watch when they play against some betterish teams and see if they're still able to grind out them same wins. But it probably could be Spurs, but I feel like we'll be right in the mix as well, you know, right there, and they're grinding it out. And like, I know it's a top 6 kind of channel, but I don't know what's going on with West Ham, but they won't go away. You know, so there's just a lot of teams in there, and
Yeah.
you just have all these teams kind of like there. So I think if anybody is in the least advantageous position, it's Chelsea, because if they are complacent and they don't look over their shoulder, they'll be right in that mix. And I'm not sure that they'll have the fight and the will to get themselves over the line while needing to put pressure on the Champions League, because that's where Tuchel needs to keep his job.
Yeah, I agree completely. I do. And this is also a great point from Rowe. Long time no see, Rowe, by the way. He says Chelsea can still win 5 trophies and have a better season, including the Super Cup and that's it. But do you know what, Rowe? This feeds into it. Don't take what we're saying as negativity. It isn't. It's just not being ostriches. It's that focus needs to come back. Otherwise, you won't win any. And you're good enough to win them. You've got this is why I'm not buying into this. You've got a brilliant squad full of highly talented players. That's why finishing 25, 30 points behind City is a disaster, because my own club, the reason why Man United's position is terrible. This is the irony. When banter goes too far, should be the name of the show. If Man United's squad is absolutely tin pot, crap, overrated, us being 7th isn't embarrassing, is it? Barring the money we spent, running the club is. But if we're a 7th place, 8th place, 9th place team in terms of quality, you can't banter me. Like, it's in me. I don't feel it. The reason I'm embarrassed about Man United is our squad is good enough to be much higher and much more consistent. Thus the embarrassment. And with Chelsea, that's my point. You can still win it, but you need to turn it around, my brother. But good point. Please do a show of who are the worst owners in the Premier League. That could be a long show, but we can definitely look at that. Your owners won't be in it though, mate, because they're brilliant. FSG. We're not putting them in it, bruv. No way. Save it for us, the ones that actually run poorly. Do you know what I mean? If Arsenal get 4th, how big a jump in the level do you think they'll make going into the next season? How far off top do you think they'd be? I'll give that one to you, Jay.
Like next season?
Yeah, if you make
like
4th.
How
Yeah, if you
this
make,
season?
so hang on. So if you make 4th going into next year, how far do you think you'll be off challenging for the Premier League?
Well, see, here's the issue is that I always think, what's the worst case scenario? Because I'm Leanne Gunner. But literally, like, that's what they call me when I'm about to go into my negativity mode. Sorry, Bella's barking. I don't know why. But if we do get 4th, I think that what we also have to look at is, yes, we'll probably be able to attract players. Yes, we'll probably be able to, do what we want to do in terms of in the market. But when I like, what is that going to do to the strain on the team in terms of our squad? And I'm not convinced that Arteta at this point has what it takes to keep us in multiple competitions throughout the season. So it could be one of those where my biggest fear would be get Champions League, get the players, and then struggle in the Champions League, trying to deal with both squads, and then end up in sixth because we can't do both, because I still am like, what's Arteta doing with our squad when we're, because we're not going to be able to buy a whole new squad. Like we'll be able to add like 2 or 3 players. So I do think that that's something that I do worry about, because you can't just be in Champions League one season and be in sixth the next, because we're not going to win the Champions League. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a slippery slope with us because our squad is very thin, and I haven't seen it yet in terms of the consistency in multiple competitions. But I still am kind of like, this may sound bad, and like this may sound controversial. I'll probably be clipped for this, but I think for where the club is at right now with this particular squad, I think for us to be successful, it might be fifth, Europa League, and then try to get into Champions League the season after without the pressure of the Champions League and all of that as well. Like, I know that sounds like, why wouldn't you want to get in there as soon as possible? But I do believe in arriving when you should, because it could backfire.
Yeah, look, and I get that. And again, as a Man United fan saying this, I know obviously you saw me clashing with a few gooners today that didn't understand that I was praising Arsenal for doing something brilliant with the getting essentially the rules are going to be changed over the postponements, because everybody's been taking the proverbial piss out of the rules, and Premier League just always thought no one's going to exploit it. They're only going to do it if it's mass CV problems. No, no, that's not how human beings work. But anyway, there is a train of thought that Arsenal were in a slightly inflated position because a couple of teams were nowhere near as good this season as they were expected to be. I don't think that equates to you being in a false position, but that's how it gets twisted into. So I get your logic that if you suddenly go in fourth and then you've got to play 2 games a week, the expectations rise to, well, let's now push towards second. We've got to go deep into the Champions League. Maybe with this young squad, that much pressure too soon could make them crumble. There is that. At the same time, though, at the same time, so then that was I don't have a theory on it. That was just a thought as such. But at the same time, your young players could rise to the challenge. So it could work in reverse, where your young players actually think, we can do this. We achieve something ahead of time. That could motivate them. If you bring in the right players in the summer, there could be that explosion from you to that next level. It sometimes, what they say about pressure can create diamonds or it can burst pipes. It will be about managing that squad. And that's where Arteta then gets tested at a level he hasn't been tested at yet. And I remember Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool nearly won the league. And then the following season, they had to play Champions League football and challenge for the Premier League. That was then the expectation. He couldn't handle it. He had a bigger squad. They bought players. I know they lost. I think they lost Luis Suarez. They did lose Luis Suarez. But at the same time, it just didn't work. He couldn't handle not being able to play his fittest and best team once a week. And I'm not it's just how
no. That's my apprehension. And so, like, that may sound backwards, but if you like, I can see this
you just
team
like being
going.
the underdog, don't you? You just like being the underdog, and then you can celebrate
Not
overachieving.
really, not really the underdog per
Yeah.
se, but I do think that just like Man United is kind of seen finishing in second probably was the worst possible thing that could have happened, because it added a layer of expectation that your squad probably wasn't ready for, and the manager certainly wasn't ready for.
Yeah.
So fighting for, because I would expect us, if we finished in fifth this season, to win the Europa League. That is what my expectation would be, and to finish in the top 4. That's what I would expect, because
I hear that.
I just feel like that's a huge jump. But then I always maintain that we're 5th through 7th. I
hear
still,
that.
even now, don't think that, although we've been in and around that spot, I just feel like we're a little bit green right now.
I hear you on that. There's a comment here that says 2 days in a row we've hit the like target and didn't get a clue. Not on the shows. I haven't said there's a target on any shows, but if you hit, we can do it now. If we hit 750 likes right now on this show, I will give another clue for the secret phrase. But there we go. And as I've said, it's 750 on every normal Every normal stream when set, match reactions, we're setting it now at over 1,000. So there we go. And I haven't made that claim before. I've just said it there, just so Nez, who's always trying to catch Mr. Terry Fluids out, that's the standard 750. And actually, I'm gonna make it higher for match reactions. We get a lot of people 1,500 for match reactions when we're live, and 750 on other shows when we're live, and we'll do it for you. So it's been said, it's been done. Go cry somewhere else, buddy. Go cry somewhere else. I did have a comment here saying, Terry, you're not praising Arsenal. You're just waiting for them to slip up so you can laugh. I'm a rival of Arsenal, so if they slip up, yes, of course I would laugh. I mean, just imagine having the thought process of, oh, Terry, you're such a bad rival fan of Arsenal's that you wouldn't laugh at them if it went wrong. That's so weird. That's weird. That's very weird. Very weird. But nice try again. Nice try. No, it isn't the same secret phrase. We revealed what that was and we started a new one, my bros. Thank you very much. Moving the goalposts. Yeah, of course we move the goalposts. We've got to make things there. We're setting a standard for every show, and that's been done. On the like side of things, get it done. It's easy to hit the like. Just hit the like button. It can't cost you a penny. It's on you. If you don't want to hit it, don't hit it. You don't get a clue. Don't bother me. When will Potter get a chance? When will Potter get a top 6 chance? You love Graham Potter, don't you?
I love watching that team play, but they are so frustrating because they really, if they had one gunman, just one top 6, no, like I would put money on it because they play, it's not just good football, but there's like nothing to it. Like they actually just need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net. Graham Potter's done a fantastic job with barely anything. For a whole season, he played with Dan Burn as left back, and I just thought that's how you piece things together when you're under very stressful circumstances. And I think he's somebody that could go to a club that maybe isn't, I don't even think he needs to go to one of the clubs that spends the most money. He doesn't need to go to like a City or a Chelsea, but even a club that is looking to bring up young players, not spend as much as everybody else, but be super competitive and do those types. I think he could do a good job with that because he's done well with barely anything. And yeah, they play super football. I can't wait to see where Cucurella ends up. He's not going to stay there. I could easily see him going to City. He's such a good player.
Yeah.
I
think
love watching them play.
What it also shows you as well, though, is again, a team can maintain its quality. And Brighton aware that me and Lee Gunner had this argument a couple of weeks ago where he said, if you basically, it doesn't matter if you're Brighton or Man City, if you don't finish first, you're unsuccessful. And I disagree. I think there are levels because of spend as one example. But Brighton have been able to maintain their quality when having Dan Burn, who's about 9 foot tall, playing left back. So that's why when I see a huge drop off from a gargantuan club whose backup players are better than Dan Burn, that's why I find it very difficult to attribute that as the reason and a very acceptable excuse for them to fall off, because we've seen other people cope with it to a degree. I expected a drop off with some of your best players being out, but not a what was the point? What the point swing? The point swing with what they were leading by must be something like a 20-point swing in the space of a month. It's crazy. So yeah, he could definitely do well there. I wanted to ask you as well. The Arsenal thing's kind of changed direction. So there's a few super chats here. One says, I got here late. The Athletic are reporting an Arsenal player is under investigation for bet fixing a yellow card. There's a few super chats relating to that. I've heard rumors on Twitter it's Granit Xhaka got a yellow card, and there was a huge volume of bets that went in. But I don't know if you've read anything about this at all. I'm sure you have.
Let's go back a little bit because we're going a little bit too far. So the FA are focusing on the betting patterns and not an individual player. So they're investigating those patterns, and people have put 2 and 2 together and made it that Granit Xhaka is being investigated. He's actually not being investigated. It's the betting pattern. And so we need to take a couple of steps back because we want to make sure that we're getting the facts right. But essentially, there was a yellow card given to an Arsenal player during a match in the Premier League, and there was a bet, a $65,000 pound, whatever bet that was like connected to that particular Arsenal player, Granit Xhaka, getting a yellow card in that match. And he did get one, and it was versus Leeds. And so that's what they're
Hmm.
investigating, because that's really, really strange. And
Mm.
then
Well,
now,
not Xhaka getting a yellow card isn't strange.
well, it is strange when you go back to in the Leeds match and look at how things kind of unfolded.
I
There
suppose
was
what
a
so go on. So I suppose I want to ask a question on that. I get that point. Is it a case of they're going to look at the betting pattern? I mean, could it still lead to an investigation into the player or the referee? Is that I haven't read the article, so I don't know anything about it. But
Well, it doesn't specify what's going to happen after the fact. I think after they investigate the betting pattern, then they'll go into further and see, like, you know what I mean? This is just like the initial thing. And I don't think that they're going to give us all of that information right off rip. But essentially, and this is where, your own projections come into things. There was a really easy opportunity for what what referee was that? I forget what his name is, but he's one of the older ones. But he had a very good opportunity to give Granit Xhaka a yellow card or even a red against Rafinha. It was a
yes,
terrible tackle, and
should have seen him off. Yeah.
it made no sense whatsoever, because we were up 2-0 under no threat. This was a decimated lead squad. And so I thought it was strange that he did that anyway. Then that same referee gave one of the players on the right-hand side of lead, or the left-hand side of lead squad, a yellow, because they stomped on Tomiyasu. And it was this big thing of, how did Granit Xhaka escape that
Yes.
card when he gave one to the guy that stomped Tomiyasu? Then when you fast forward to the end of the match in the 85th minute, Granit Xhaka is standing in the middle of the pitch. We're up 4-1, and he gets a yellow card for time wasting. And nobody really thought anything of it. But now that you look back on it, you're like, that
So,
looks really weird.
so a question that the way that makes sense in terms of not giving a yellow then and later is if someone put the bet on in play to say, or said he'll get a booking after that time period. Otherwise, you just book him for the first thing you could book him for, and you'd win the bet. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So maybe it's somebody at halftime and said, right, I bet that I don't know how. It depends who you bet with, but there could be. I bet he gets booked in the last 5 minutes of the game and then escapes a clear, at least yellow card, maybe even a red, just to get booked in that exact time. Of course, they're going to smell a rat. Yeah. And if that's the case, then to me, it doesn't sound like Xhaka's done anything, because Xhaka made a tackle that should have seen him get a red card. I mean, he should have been sent off for that tackle. It was awful. So if he was waiting to the 85th minute to pick up a yellow to earn his friends some money, he wouldn't have made that tackle. You wouldn't have thought so anyway. But yeah, well, we'll wait to see what comes out with that. It's one of those things where I can't express an opinion because I haven't read the article. So Elliot Page here says Potter has 3 wins and 18, Terry. Yeah, and he's tracking towards making Brighton finish in their highest position in the history of their football club. Horses for courses, my dear friend Elliot Page. Horses for courses.
I mean, of course, a manager it's not always the case that, like, you have to, like, Potter doesn't have to do something extraordinary, like get that Brighton team into the top 4 to be recognized as one of the best up and coming managers in the Premier League. And so other clubs should be looking at him and saying, okay, if we give him these resources, what could he do? And this is why I said that he's probably more suited to taking over at Leicester, taking over at Tottenham, because we know Levy is tight with the wallet, taking over a club like that, where he's not going to be given a lot, but what he is given, he can do a lot with, and that is a mark of a really good manager, because they stayed on track, even though they've been missing certain players. They've missed Basuma at certain points. Like we already said, he had Dan Burn playing left back for a significant amount of time. Lallana's been injured quite a bit. He has no striker. The man has no striker. So I know that underlying metrics only go so far, but like when you add the underlying metrics with your eye test, you cannot really deny that, like, he's done a lot with a little.
And the point is, he just needs a chance at a bigger and better club with more money, so we can test the theory. Like if he never gets the chance, you're never going to know what he can do. Again, you could be right, Elliot. He could go to a club where the expectation's higher and that expectation crumbles him. And that's kind of a nice segue. We had the super chat earlier. It says, Terry, this stream started off terribly, just like United season. Who would you like United to sign this window? One player. For me, like it would be, if I could sign one player right now, a magic one time, fairly realistic, would probably be someone like Declan Rice to come into the middle. However, interesting report that's kind of come up out. Let's say report. Ragnick has spoke about the Martial thing, which I know we did to death on Monday and Tuesday, but he's now speaking about Jadon Sancho and how the pressure of having to deliver for Manchester United is almost consuming him. It's, making him. We've seen Sancho all season second guess himself and do whatever else. I'm asking you this, Jess, and of course the viewers, always the viewers. Is this an excuse for Sancho not being good enough? Or do you think the pressures of having to deliver, whether people want to call us the biggest club in the world, we're certainly one of the most famous clubs in the world. Something like over 50% of all tweets about Premier League clubs are about Manchester United. There's huge pressure there. Do you think that can be very consuming for a football player?
I think two things can be true. I can think that there is a level of pressure at Manchester United and for Jadon Sancho because of all the hype of them going after him for 2 seasons and the big price tag and all of this. I think two things can be true, that is holding him back, but there is an element in me, about maybe 25%, I think that he just may not be good enough. Like, he just may not be good enough. And it's Bundesliga tax. And the reason why I say that is because it's not just the Bundesliga, it's also other leagues where I'm seeing these players come in on big price tags and they just can't get up to speed. And whether it's the first season or the second season, they're just not hitting the heights. And so I'm talking about, your Timo Werners, I'm talking about your Pepes, I'm talking about your Havertz, I'm talking about these players, your ZX, Pulisic. They all coming from these other leagues and they're not really able to get up to speed. And then not only that, they're coming to really big clubs with big expectations. And so we won't really know until Jadon Sancho gets a significant run in the team where the team is playing okay-ish. It's not an uproar where he just underperforms to the point where it just becomes fact. For a long time, it was speculation whether or not Pepe was good enough. And then at a certain cutoff point, it became fact that he is not good enough. So we don't know yet, but I think two things can be true, that it could be the pressure or he's just not good enough. And it is what it is.
Yeah. And I hear that. And I think it's a combination of a few things at the minute in terms of getting used to being in the Prem, the pressure's there. What's interesting, though, is looking at the world's most expensive transfers ever into the big 3 leagues, Serie A, La Liga, and the Premier League. And it's interesting when you just name these transfers, how many times. I just want you to quick think on this. Viewers, I want the same thing. Hit or miss straight away. No deliberating, just what your gut tells you when you hear the name and the transfer fee. So the biggest transfer fee into any of those leagues ever, 126 million, João Felix to Atletico Madrid.
You asking me?
Yes. Who else am I asking? You're the only one here. Who else am I asking?
I was like, wait, what is he waiting on? Miss.
That a hit or miss, no explanation. Right. Philippe Coutinho to Barcelona for 160 million.
Miss.
Jack Grealish to Man City, 117. These are in euros, sorry. It's 100 million pounds. So far, is he
miss, but will probably come good.
Okay. Lukaku to Chelsea for 100 million.
Flop. No. Yeah.
Dembele to Barcelona, 100 million.
Flop. Yeah.
Pogba to Man United at 85 million.
Tough, but floppish.
Cool. Gareth Bale and Ronaldo. Gareth Bale to Real Madrid for 100 million.
I guess.
Has to be. I know he's Tottenham, but he's a fucking hit. Come on. Man won 3 Champions League, scored in all the finals pretty much. Come on.
No. That's what I was going to say. I was like, he's actually been pretty good for them. So, yeah, good.
Ronaldo. Then you've got Eden Hazard to Real Madrid.
Flop. Bad.
Cristiano Ronaldo to Real Madrid.
That was such a flop. No, I'm joking. Really good.
Cool. We need to speed this up. Harry Maguire to Man United.
Flop.
Jadon Sancho to Man United. It's miss or hit. Come on, get it right.
Okay,
Come on.
fine. Miss.
Miss.
Fine.
Lukaku to Man United, 85 million.
Miss.
Van Dijk to Liverpool, 85.
Hit.
Cool. So the point I'm making here, we did 20 there and we did like 3 hits. So of the 20 we just did real quick, 17 of them are misses. So the reason I bring this up isn't to defend anybody, but it's the vast majority of these mega money deals don't fucking work. The majority don't work. There is something in this price tag that seems to, I don't know whether it's the price. You start going lower down there. You think of Luka Hernandez to Bayern Munich. People have actually the next ones are even more. The next 5: James Rodriguez to Real Madrid, Pepe to Chelsea, Luka Hernandez to Bayern Munich, Pepe to Arsenal, and Alvaro Morata to Chelsea. The next 5 on the list are also probably looked at as being misses. There's something about these price tags that just seem to kill people. Then you have to go down to number 27 before you get the next hit, which was Zidane to Real Madrid. We know it's a hit. Then you've got De Ligt to Juve. I think I would say hit, maybe. No,
that's very like
that's ambiguous then, right? The next one, number 28, KDB to Man City at 75. This is in euros, by the way, people. You're going down to number 28, and we've got like 5 or 6 hits. It's a joke.
Yeah, I mean,
I do think the pressure plays a part, but that doesn't mean they don't get criticism. It's like, no, you still deserve the criticism, bruv. Like, it's crap.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that you just need there's going to be if you really think about it, like there's going to be a small percentage of players that are going to be able to uphold that price tag at very big clubs. Like a lot of players are not great at big clubs. It's, if you look at teams all the time, you see that there's some players they've done all right, players that have been a smash, and then players that have been just not that good. And so I think when you look at it, bigger clubs will probably, unless you do things the way Man City does them, which they're like, a machine.
No, but you're right, though. But if you look at Man City spend a lot of money, but the vast majority of their signings have been between that 45 and 55 million range.
That's what I was just about to say. Yep.
Yeah,
when you stick in that,
it takes that pressure off. And Twisted Bubba with these weird questions says, Terry, what does this prove? Do you really need me to explain that?
It proves that, sometimes the big price tag, going to a big club with high expectations, there are a lot of players that are just not going to be able to uphold that. I don't even think, I think Jadon Sancho is just somebody that is crumbling under that pressure, and it doesn't help that Man United have crumbled under the pressure as well.
Of course, you've got that double jeopardy there. And I think when I look at it, and I agree with you completely, it doesn't excuse their bad performances, but I do think it's a factor. And the reason what I'm trying to show here is, in terms of some fact, is that maybe, just maybe, when you've got Bernardo Silva going in at 50 million in one summer, and Fabinho in a year later at 50 million euros, but then you've got 4 or 5 other signings that summer that are 80s, 90s, 100s, all the expectations on those players. It isn't only when Jack Grealish plays, and we do this, when Lukaku plays, we do this, Sancho, we play this, Pepe, you cost so much money. We need deliverance every single game. Otherwise, you get criticized. And maybe there's an element of us as fans where we just need to say, do you know what? Maybe the prices are too much. And a lot of it's based on commerciality. And we've got to lower their expectation, because it seems to be crippling these players. And from a fan point of view, I don't care who flops at everybody else's clubs. If we as fans are putting all this pressure on Sancho and he flops, why don't we just remove the pressure and he might deliver? I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking crazy.
Well, that's why talking about the price tag is always, because I know when I listen to commentary on Arsenal, it's always the 50 million pound Ben White, the 72 million Pepe. That's how you enter the room at that point. You enter the room as a big signing, and everybody only talks about your price tag. But we know that these players a lot of times are not actually worth that amount. As you've said, a lot of it is commercial, like whatever. I don't want to say the word because I know I'm about to like really mess it up, but it's the commercial aspect of that player. Lukaku, was like a commercial signing. It was supposed to be Holland. It wasn't. And Jack Grealish was somewhat of a commercial signing, getting the number 10 and all of that. But what I would say is that for me, from an Arsenal perspective, and we're going after this Vlahovic guy, and I don't think it's going to come off, but a 22-year-old on 150 grand a week, going up to 300 grand a week if certain things happen, and a 60 to 80 million dollar price tag just smells floppish to me. It just smells floppish. I wish we would have gotten like, I know this, I wish we would have gotten like, I like the 30 to 50 million pound mark because I feel like that is a safe little place to operate.
It's safe now. And again, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, that was the big money.
That was
it's, you know,
exactly.
when Wayne Rooney was costing 27 million, when you think Wayne Rooney cost 27 million pound, you know, people look back, God, that was a pittance. Well, listen, when Mr. Francis was the first 1 million pound player in the, I want to say 70s, might have been 80s. My dates are off, but the outrage was the same then. The expectation on him was there. And again, I've said this for a while now. I think fans play such a big part of overhyping and then putting too much pressure upon players, and then we see it consume them, then we moan. Like we are victims of our own expectations in many ways. But there we go. We had a question here actually that says, "Well, what do I think of Suarez to Villa?" Look, I can tell. I know why Gerrard wants to have him at the club. I wouldn't mind seeing him back in the league again because he just get booed every single ground he goes to, and that isn't a bad thing to see. But listen, everybody that has tuned in, a massive thank you to each and every single one of you. One of the biggest live shows that Jess and I have done on Straight Facts. So thank you. Please make sure you come across and you subscribe and follow the Twitch account, which is pinned to the link, pinned to the live comment section or in the comment section. But we're going live in about 45 minutes for the watch-alongs tonight. I've got to get this room all changed and sorted before then. Jess, thank you very much indeed, as ever.
Thank you for having me.
Always go check out She Knows Arsenal. Go and get that checked out on YouTube right about now. But until next time, take care, goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you all again.